lot of directors in Hollywood rely on recurring visual tricks that communicate their sense of style to the audience. Martin Scorsese really likes to use elaborate tracking shots and crazy crash zooms, and for guys like Fincher, it's impossible camera movements that he then stitches together with visual effects. But in my opinion, nobody working in Hollywood makes this more obvious in their work than Wes Anderson. A lot of Anderson's visual style comes from his sets, costumes, attention to detail, elaborate, precise blocking, etc. I, however, want to talk about some of the simpler choices he makes, with his framing, his camera movement, and particularly his sound design and needle drops. This is how Wes Anderson frames and scores relationships. The Royal Tenenbaums especially is an absolute masterclass in conveying character relationships and feelings with his framing choices and music. Let's first take a look at the These Days scene, which is the first time we see Richie and Margot interact as adults. Richie is harboring a tabooed love for his adopted sister Margot. At the start of the scene, Richie is shot from a distance as he moves throughout this harbor. The only sound we hear is Alec Baldwin's monotone narration describing the literal what's happening of Richie's movements.
He had made a request for his usual escort, the one from his days on the circuit, to meet him at the pier by way of the Green Line bus. As always, she was late.
What happens then is Anderson goes to a tight over-the-shoulder shot, as we wait with Richie in anticipation of her arrival. And just as Margot gets off the bus, These Days by Nico kicks in, and I just get absolutely transported. We move from the literal narration of Baldwin straight into the song that just brings all the emotion of the scene right to the forefront. We're no longer thinking, we're only feeling. And notice the way Margot and Richie are framed alone as they are introduced to each other. Margot is shot in medium close-up as she gets off the bus, but Richie's close-up is even tighter, suggesting his desire, his emotional intensity, are stronger than Margot's in that moment. Then this slow-mo shot from Margot's perspective really draws out the tension of that meeting. They have this funny interaction, and the ice is broken. So after that, Anderson goes and finally frames them together, comfortable with each other again. He pulls the same trick of laying out all the character dynamics with camera and music again in Rushmore. Despite this film being from the perspective of Max, when he introduces himself to Miss Cross, his head is cut off by the frame, adding mystery from her point of view. Then they are both framed separately as he keeps his distance, and finally he moves into frame with her, but in an awkward spot over her shoulder, like a type of nuisance, setting up the type of relationship that they have the rest of the film. Just to show one more example of this from the Royal Tenenbaums, Anderson does the exact same trick with Margot and Richie in the 10th scene. They are both introduced to the scene with respective solo shots. Then as Richie sits down there in the same frame, but sitting across from each other and at different heights.
You want to see?
As Richie shares something personal and Margot reciprocates, he joins her on her side of the bed and in the same shot.
I have to tell you something.
What's that?
I love you.
The Rolling Stones' As She Smiled Sweetly underscores the connection between them. Again, the music slightly muddles the dialogue, enhancing the performance and emotion by letting the audience just melt into the scene with them. Wes Anderson is an absolute master using pop music in his movies. His song choices are always motivated by characters and camera, and he never picks the most obvious choice. Again, they don't communicate what to think, they communicate what to feel. As his career has gone on, I think his wide frames and extremely precise movements have taken away a bit from the strength of his characters. Even in this scene on the bridge, he pulls off the opposite trick. Eli and Margot are in the frame together, and as they break up, it goes into solo shots, but he never even has to cut. These shots are very elaborate, but they're simple. They don't draw attention to themselves in the way his later work does. In the future, I hope Wes is able to get back to the character-driven master of tone he was before animation changed him into the exacting filmmaker he is now. It's fun when directors make something a little rough around the edges.